Well, hello, friends. David Vos, and got a beautiful video for you today. Man, I really think that we need to talk about some things because we've been talking about some things, and these things that we're talking about are pretty revolutionary. They're amazing concepts that probably a few years ago people would have just been talking about in science fiction, in some novel. There were even religions that said, "Oh, we believe in this and that," and we thought they were crazy, right? There was some group of people that was waiting out in the field for a UFO to come pick them up, and that was the second coming of Jesus. We thought they were crazy. Well, they probably were. But as we say, the truth is more amazing than the lies, and it's more fascinating because the lies that we've been taught were more or less fantasy. And we've gone over this before, but just think about the things that we were taught. There's a big bearded man in the sky, and there's little fairies running around up there, with wings and stuff, and there's rainbows and a big pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, And now, don't get me wrong. I believe in angels. I believe in fairies. But, you see, I want to know what it really means. I want to understand what a fairy is. Why is it that people for hundreds of thousands of years anyway, at least thousands, have believed in mystical, mythological, crazy things that we cannot verify one thing of it to a scientist, supposedly. Scientists can't verify any of it. We cannot verify any of it, supposedly. But as Christians, we used to believe that Jesus was going to come riding on his horse in the second coming. I guess the horse was like Perseus. And he was going to come flying down out of, but that Jason and the Argonauts story of the Greeks, those guys were mythological, storytellers or liars. It's all myth. But you just listen to us Christians. We know about Jesus. You see, he's coming back from the clouds of heaven, and he's going to, give forth a shout, and all the people in the graves are going to come crawling up out of the grave. Do you really understand what a miracle that would be? The problem is that as far as miracles go, things that just like. Now, don't get me wrong. You can defy gravity because there's a law that says everything that's got to come down, right? It's a law of gravity. But there are other laws like aerodynamics that you can use to, make. So an illusion's different. I'm not talking about illusion. There are people that can appear to walk through walls or whatever, and they might be using cameras or mirrors or whatever. But I'm talking about as far as we know. Uri Geller, he could bend spoons and forks, right? But we don't realize that he's got a little bit of acid on his finger. He's rubbing he's rubbing the spoon, and there's a little bit of chemical that he's putting on that metal, and it's warming it up, it's heating it up, and it's just it's bending. It's like, oh boy. Well, what about the one he put in the bag and he sealed it? Well, he probably put a little on there, stuck it in the bag. And he knew scientifically that it would take 30 seconds to start affecting the spoon. See, these illusionists, they take a rope, right? Look at this. And then they bring it together, and they take the other end, and they clip it, and they say, okay, now we should have two ropes. Now, whoop, the same. Then, it's just as long as it was before. I just magically put it back together. Well, it's an illusion. Because, you see, when he takes the rope and he puts it together, and then he makes it look like he's turning it around, he fooled you. He held it where you couldn't see it, and he did it the other way in a way that you couldn't see. So when he cut, he just cut the part that was already cut, just a little bit off the tip, and you didn't realize it, that he never cut that rope. But you thought, wow, man, he's an illusionist. He's a magician, right? So we're not talking about stuff like that. I believe in, in miracles too. But I believe that everything that happens in life is a miracle. You know, when a baby's born, now that's a miracle. I mean, how in the world, why are we here? What in the world is the reason for our existence? How does a flower grow? Do you really need a creator because of a design? You ever heard the old story? Well, you see, everything is like a clock, like a watch. Now, you take a look at a watch, you open it back up, and you see all these little moving parts, and it's so intricate in detail. Now, don't tell me that watch didn't have a maker. Just like this universe, it's got all this intricate detail. So it has to have a maker. Well, who made the maker? Well, now, don't you ask questions like that. That's blasphemy, son. Now, don't you even ask those kind of... When you ask any of these other questions that we've got predetermined answers for, right? It's in our book, our holy book. But don't you be asking any questions that might, get me into trouble. Because I'm a priest, and I don't want to look bad, But, let me ask you this. If design, perfect, beautiful design, like the design of a flower, okay? You say, well, look at the beautiful flower. That means that there's got to be a God who created it. It's got to be what is a God? Well, it's a bearded man in the sky, and comes down there and creates it. 6 days. Okay, well, how does the snowflake become created? Have you ever seen a snowflake? They say there's not one snowflake. Now, of course, they wouldn't know this. What are the odds, right? They're going by mathematics. They're saying that each snowflake is created separately, not by God, okay? Not by some bearded man in the sky that reaches down must have 1 million arms, because there's millions and zillions and quadrillions of snowflakes every winter, just in my town, right? Okay, now all over the world, there's a lot of snowflakes, and every one of them are different, and they have this most intricate design. Who created the snowflake? Well, it's exactly like your cell. It's exactly like the flower or a crystal. They have the exact same design. It's based on what? Well, what happens is, because of condensation, God didn't say, I want all the water to condense in right now. No, he made the law of condensation in the beginning. Okay, I'll go for that. See, but there's no time and space either. So when was the beginning? See, we're really getting confused here. But this condensation means that the water, because of heat, rises. It evaporates. And it goes up into the clouds. And when it reaches a certain point where, it's too heavy because of the principle of aerodynamics, you just can't keep it floating anymore on a cloud. The little drop of water is too heavy and it starts to drop. Once it drops back down, see, this condensation is a little mist in the air. And then it drops back down, and as that little perfectly round raindrop. Now, how does it get perfectly round? Who created that roundness? Well, it's a principle. It's these principles that Newton come up with. Stuff like velocity and speed, and something going in a certain direction will continue in a certain direction until acted upon by another object. And these are just laws, simple laws, like if something's occupying a place in a time and its place in a certain space, then something else cannot be in that same space. And if it's the same physical, if it's two physical things, they can't occupy the same space at the same time. Things like that. So these are just laws of the universe. If you make a left, you take a hole and you cut it, and now you have a left and a right. Well, you can't make a left without a right. That's a law. See, you can't say that something is long without first knowing that something could be short. So these are the laws of the universe. And gravity is based on physical laws. And so it's just, and nobody can really understand what a law is, because what makes the law, it seems like the law has a priority beyond all things, beyond human consciousness. Do laws exist because of human consciousness? If there was no humans or any entities or intelligences in the universe, would there still be law? Well, as long as there was a left and a right, that would still be a law. If nobody was around to see it, if it was an up and a down, then it would still be a law that up is up and down is down. You can't mix up with down, because you mix up with down and you get a hole again. See? So if you have cold and heat, and when they meet, nobody blows on it and says, now start spinning. Okay, but the cold and the heat are two variables that are opposites. And as they meet, you got a little law called equilibrium. Something's got to happen. Something's got to give. They've got to become one. They've got to, like the heat and the cold can't continue once they've touched. They can't continue to be just heat and cold, because the cold is going to affect the heat. It's going to make it warm in the middle. It's not going to be hot. It's not going to be cold. It's going to be warm. And that's going to pull the cold into the hot so that we can get that warm. See, the hot's going to affect the cold. It's going to start heating the cold up. And you can't put something hot in a room that's cold and not expect that room to get warm. So when you start doing that, things got to move. You open a barn door and there's dust in there, and the light comes shining through the barn door. Well, that's heat. And that area in the barn cold. And you start looking at this dust in the light swirling. This wind starts going around. What is wind? Well, according to the Bible, wind is spirit. And you're spirit. Well, what is wind? It's an invisible force. And who caused it? Well, this is the law of equilibrium. And so it starts a spinning and it makes a hurricane. This is why we have weather. So back to how does a snowflake, this beautiful design of a snowflake, how does it get created? Well, so it begins to fall because it makes a little round raindrop. As it begins to fall, it reaches a place somewhere where the temperature is just right at freezing. As soon as it reaches that place where it's at freezing, and it's in a free fall, and because of gravity, it's starting to make that little raindrop flatten out. And the wind going up through it, and it's also beginning to spin because of heat and cold, the wind's going to start making pressure from the bottom. So it's going to flatten out. And as it flattens out, and it reaches freezing, right at that point where it's freezing, it freezes. And because when things are cold, they contract. So that flat piece of water, a little flat disc that's now coming down, immediately contracts and breaks and cracks in perfect symmetry. And no one of these snowflakes form exactly the same, because no one of these snowflakes is in the same spot, they don't hit the cold air at the same time, they don't have the same dimensions. There's all these variables, and there's a million zillion variables in the universe. So it's called negative and positive, good and bad. And good and bad have to exist in the universe, because you couldn't have good without bad. So you couldn't even know that something was sweet if you haven't tasted the bitter. So that was fun. Well, the reason I know is because I've been in situations where it wasn't fun. So the universe is like that. It's just a law. It has to be. Nobody created it that way. And if there were a bearded man in the sky that sort of mastered all of this and was God now, he was like a big master magician, right? And he could just, it would only be because he knew the law. It was a law irrevocably put into action from all of eternity. Because it's inside. It's within everything. See, there is no time and space in reality. Those are concepts. Just perception. But the universe then could also be understood as just our perception. But what is perception? It gets very, very deep. But as far as whether or not we could perceive that the universe had to be created because of design, that's just not true. Because in the same way that snowflake is created, every one of them, every day, somewhere it's snowing somewhere, probably in Antarctica somewhere, every day of the year, or in the Arctic, or in Siberia. Every day, another snowflake comes down, and every one of them are always different. And they're beautiful, and they all have a beautiful design. And it's exactly the same thing with flowers. Because you see, there's an energy in the earth, static electricity, magnetism. And you've ever had a piece of paper and you took some metal shavings and put it on top, and you had a magnet and you put it on the bottom and you did this, and you could see the metal shavings moving around on the top, making a design or whatever, depending on the magnets. Have you ever seen one of these YouTube commercials where people have this speaker, and they have a flat surface and the speaker under it, and they'll put little metal shavings, and then they'll turn Bach or Beethoven or one of these, any kind of music, and depending on the music, which is, every music has a different vibration, a different tone, a different harmony, it will make a beautiful flower, a beautiful design, just like the snowflake. It's just like a flower. Every flower has, some flowers have 6 petals and some have 5, but they're usually in just a little bud, and then they'll just sort of open. And like a rose that has all kinds of petals, right? And they just keep opening and opening and opening and opening. Some plants, it's leaves that open like this, and then at the very top it's like this bud, and there's a seed. You say, well, that's design. Somebody had to create that. There's a seed in there. What is the seed? It's that impression or the design, just like the design in the snowflake. But every snowflake's a seed, right? It's in a little impression. And so, as certain vibrations, some vibrations, when they create a design, that vibration keeps going. Like, when you take a rock and you throw it on the water, and it hits and ricochets off the water and hits again and ricochets off and hits again. And it'll keep doing that. It'll keep going out. The waves keep going out for infinity. Gets to a place where you can't see the wave anymore, but it's still there. All the waves are just going out, and everything has its own impression, its own vibration, its own frequency. Everything that exists and always will exist. So if you make a sound in the forest, that sound is a vibration. It's going to go out there. If you make a sound of harmony, you're going to harmonize things. It's love, and you're going to bring things toward you. If you make a sound of violence and you start screaming and being, loud and not in harmony, it's a screech or a siren, then you're going to make everything run. You're going to repel everything. And that's just a law. And as you repel and bring things towards you, these vibrations are going and coming. You have a certain pattern as who you are. And the pattern makes a certain design. That's your DNA. And it replicates itself. And there's complicated DNA, and there's less complicated DNA. There's chemicals. There's biology. And then it goes on to higher and higher forms of intelligences, creations. And all of the universe is created this way. But there wasn't a time when there was nothing. Because there was never time. Time is a concept. See, there's just this one thing in the universe. Just this one thing. The whole. You can call it the whole. But in the whole is everything. You cut it in half, left and right, up and down, blue and green and red. Touch it, it's soft. Well, then there's got to be hard. So all the variables exist. It's quantum physics. And so you exist in multiple universes, because there's the possibility of you going that way, or another, taking that road, or another possibility you could have took that road. And those two possibilities exist. And so there's universes everywhere in the universe. There's the possibilities, these variables that will eventually play themselves out, and they're infinite, because numbers are infinite. You can put a 0 on the end of a number forever and ever and ever. So the universe is just by itself, by virtue of itself, it exists. Without existence itself, there couldn't be God. And now we'll talk about who is God. You're God. See? You're the only being that exists in this one moment, in this now. See? Because I'm over here in this other space, in this other moment. See? You're in that other moment, in that other place. And in that place, in that now, you are all there is. You're the whole. But in reality, there are a zillion variables. I'm another variable. You're a variable. I'm a variable. But your variable only exists in that time and in that space. So you've got to become aware of who you are. But you have the ability, through sympathy and empathy, to get outside of yourself by your eyes, and you can register, you can receive information and impressions from other things. A rock can do that too. When two rocks meet, there's a vibration, and they feel each other, and they react. The rock reacts to the other rock, and sometimes they break, or chemical reactions or anything like that. It's a very simple reaction, but it's the same principle. When humans, and a boy and a girl, come together, there are pheromones and things going on. They can, you may not even know it, but you can smell that. That's a woman. And you start, your hormones start moving, and nothing is going to stop you from trying to go over there and talk to that girl. Because you see, you don't have free will. Not the physical world. The physical world is operating on these laws. The rock's going to come together, and vibration's going to go out, and it's all going to be a beautiful, beautiful dance. And you watch the birds out in the wild, and they're doing their dance. Why? Because they want to come together. See, that equilibrium. It's a law. There's got to be equilibrium. There's got to be left and right, and men and girls and boys and male and female. And this is the universe. So all of that is existence, and it exists by virtue of itself. Okay. But now God comes along. According to the ancient mythologies and the ancient histories, the first two gods was chaos and order. Yeah. And they had children, heaven and earth, and all this is, and it's. So what it's trying to tell you is that there never was a time when nothing didn't exist. In everything, there is the same principles. The chaos and the order, the negative and the positive, the male and the female, the hot and the cold, the up and the down, the right and the left. And everything is a whole. Everything is part of the whole. And even though you're only conscious of this one little speck, this one little part of the whole, it's still part of the entire whole. Just like the Apostle Paul says, there's one body, but there are many members. We're all one in union with Christ. Christ said, I and the Father are one. So the universe is one. And what we have to understand is that all of these stories that we've been reading and listening to, whether it be the Sumerian tablets or the Bible, they're very beautiful stories. Like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, we talked about that, and the mermaid story, and the story of the genie and Aladdin's lamp, and all of these stories, they were told to mankind to help us understand the universe, to help us understand who we are. See? Because the great grand mystery is this. The universe is vast. The universe is vast. And way out yonder is another star. And on that star, there's physical and spiritual, just like there is here. Because these laws exist everywhere. Because they exist by virtue of themselves. So, if you take mass and you build that mass up so it's so heavy, the more mass you have, the more gravity. It's pulling in. It's pulling in. It's getting heavier and heavier, and it's pulling and pulling. You get enough mass that you can actually pull all the solid into a round ball in the center. Then the part of the elemental table that is the lightest is going to be on the top. You're going to have air. So any planet in the universe is going to have air and water, which is the necessity, what we need in order to have life. And therefore life will just automatically be on any planet that has water, and it's got to have a ground too, right? You got to walk around. You got to have air. You got to have sunshine. So life's not going to exist out floating around in the dark ether. Okay, where life exists is always through molecular structure and design, and it's always the same. You got the elemental chart, and what is that? Why is this really hard, like uranium and gold, and this is really light, like air and helium? Because of the mass. It starts pulling the heavier parts together and leaving the lighter parts. Because remember, when the two rocks hit, they have a vibration, and the vibration goes out. And in the center, you can see the waves. But as they go out, they get harder and harder to see. They still exist. It's like your eye, right? You have an eye, and you can see for thousands, you can see for millions of miles. You can see stars. They're millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of miles away. Your ear, you can only hear things that maybe a few miles away. Not millions. But to touch something, you've got to get right up close. Okay, what's happening is your body is observing everything around it, and there are various waves of energy. There's vibrations. And so the smaller vibrations are perceived by the eye. That's light. It's travels at 186,000 miles per second and it's very, very fast. But the slower vibrations, that's mass. So the universe has got all this energy because of the fact that up and down are pushing on each other, right? Left and right is tugging. Male and female is trying to become one. It's trying to, hot and cold. They're trying to make a hurricane out of that. So it's moving because of all the variables. They've got to learn who they are. Each of the variables have got to understand who the other variable is, and they've got to have perception. And there are higher perceptions and lower perceptions, and eye and hearing and touching, smelling. So on every planet that revolves around any star, if you find one of those planets that is at the right place around the star, that it will receive enough sunlight, but not too much, because then it'll burn it. That's a law. Yeah, too much sunlight will burn you. Anywhere in the universe, I'm sorry. And not enough will freeze. And if you freeze, then you go, and it's solid. But the sunlight makes it, it turns into liquid, right? You can burn it up and turn it into gas. So you see, depending on the temperature, that's going to make your object either fluid or gaseous or hard. And then you got this elemental table. And as it gets hard, and you put more and more on there, it builds more mass, it starts sucking it in, and it starts pulling all the mass into a center. And at the center of the earth, there will be uranium. You go mine for gold under the ground. See? Crystals and stuff, they might be on the top, and quartz, and then above that, you might have minerals like calcium deposits and things. And then above that, you might have water, and above that, you're going to have air and the ozone. So on any planet that you could find where there was the right elements or the right temperatures and the right circumstances existed, life would develop immediately. Immediately. Nobody has to create it, because these forces are going to, by nature, they're going to form water and air, depending on the temperature and the distance from the sun and the mass, and all of these different variables are going to, by law, anywhere in the universe, is going to make a planet with life. And so, because of this, there are many, many planets in the universe that are just right. And probably every star, most stars, probably have a planet that's at the right temperature and the right place from the sun and the right size, and life can exist. But some of these suns are huge. Some of these suns are huge. I mean, they eclipse our sun by, 20, 50, 1,000 times, 100,000 times. Some of these suns probably have multiple planets inhabited by individuals. And all of these individuals are going to be entities. And just like our world that's got to have mass, it's going to obey all these laws, the laws that exist by virtue of themselves. Same laws are going to exist there. Because it would be a real miracle to have a universe where you had competing laws. In one universe, it's a law that, things go up and they don't go down. Well, then you'd have chaos, and the universe would be chaos, and there wouldn't be, the universe isn't like that. The reason the universe exists the way it does with this beautiful design is because of the fact that all of the laws are permanent. And they are laws because they exist by virtue of themselves. Nobody created them. Somebody tried to create a law. I get everything. It's mine. That's the law. Well, then everybody would die, and then eventually I'd die, see? But thank goodness we're not going by somebody's laws. We're not under law. That just creates chaos and stupidity. What we want is the ability for there to be something that is unmovable and true. We're seeking truth. We're not seeking fantasies. We're seeking the truth. Truth can only be one thing. And I guarantee that the truth that's on this planet is the same truth that's on Nibiru or Alcyon or Aldebaran or Vega or Alpha Centauri or wherever. They got the same truth. The same absolute truths and variables that exist on their planet exist on ours. And so therefore, they're made up of intelligences. They can proceed just like a rock. Anywhere in the universe can crack and chemical process and the same thing. Okay, so same thing with as you get higher and higher forms of life, more complicated patterns and vibrations and frequencies. And it begins to form biological things, and then it forms things that run around moving on their own, and it sort of remembers what it did a minute ago, and it can repeat that. And it can appear to be beautiful design when it's just random chaos. But it's just, the universe in a sense is random chaos, and yet on the other hand, it's operating in complete order. Because when you take that marble and you shoot it out there and it hits a bunch of marbles in a circle, it doesn't just shoot the marbles out chaotically. No, there's an exact science. It hits at a certain angle, it's going to go that way, and it's going to go this way, and it's a perfect, absolute system of order. You can determine exactly where that marble is going to go and where all the other marbles are going to go. The universe isn't random. It's based on law. So the universe exists by virtue of itself everywhere in the universe. And there's a little planet called Nibiru out there. And they went for thousands of years advancing, and their life form got more and more complicated, and they were able to perceive and think, and they retained information. The universe is a beautiful thing because, you see, what started off as just variables in existence itself, that exists by virtue of itself, it began to remember the things that it was doing. And it built up patterns. And that became consciousness. And so, God then is the part of the universe that remembers and understands and conceives and is conscious. That's the part of the universe that's looking at the rest of it and remembering what it's doing and looking at it in awe. And it says, wow, this is beautiful. And so on this planet of Nibiru, they went on along for millions of years, and their planet got to a place where it was going to die. And they said, well, boys, we got a few thousand years left, and then this planet's gone. Okay? Every sun in the universe eventually explodes into a nova. And all the beings in that part of the universe, they evolve to a place where they're in consciousness. That light is so big, so powerful, that it just explodes in a nova, and their consciousness just expands into the rest of the universe, and they become one with a greater part of the universe. They learn and they advance to a much higher form of life. And everybody has to go through these same things. It takes millions and zillions and billions of years because we're all part of this one thing called God. And God exists and his body. See, the mother and the father and the son, they exist together forever. And the body and the wife is the body, the bride. And the great wedding is going to occur with the spirit and matter. See, inseparably joined in eternal felicity. This is the whole universe. And so it's a perfect harmonious song being played. It's a vibration. And if you learn the song, if you can play on your 10-string harp and harmonize those 10 strings, you become a master of that vibration. And you begin to understand how to manipulate those laws. Now, you know that there's gravity, but you learn that you can, with aerodynamics, you can fly. So you become the master. It's no longer an illusion. It's not an illusion, it's magic. So you want to be a magician, you've got to learn how to manipulate these laws. You've got to learn how to, first of all, you have to have faith, because you have to know that these laws are going to always, forever, do the exact same thing. And you have faith that it's going to happen. That cliff, you're going to go down. You know that if you have a wingspan of 10 feet and certain weight, and you jump off, and you get a little bit of tailwind and stuff, you can fly. These are laws. It always works. Then you get a hole in your plane, and you go down. So you have to figure out what kind of material you can use that doesn't get a hole. So you just have to figure these things out, and then you can become a magician. You can walk on water. You can walk through walls. So they got to the point, these people on Nibiru, where they could fly, and they could go to, interestingly, coincidentally, right, just at the point where their planet was about to perish, and they had to do something. It was at that point that they were intelligent enough that they could now master space travel. See, the universal providence provided them a way to survive and to carry on what they had learned and all their knowledge They could carry it on. They didn't have to perish with their planet. They can continue on their evolutions. And so just like many thousands and millions of planets had done for millions and thousands of years before them, they went searching, just like on Star Trek. They went searching for intelligent life in the universe around them. And they came to a place called Earth. And they found an Earth that it's about halfway out from the center of our galaxy. Nothing special. It's not advanced so far that it's about to die. And it's not just so incubescent that it's just a seed, but it's developed to intelligent life. And the indigenous peoples that were on this planet, the Earthlings, they were capable of learning. They had intelligence. They were beautiful. Man, these Nibirians, they had found it. Their scientists came down and said, this is perfect. But we can't just take over their bodies and incarnate into their bodies, okay? Because their bodies have genetic code, and their consciousness is connected with that. And they are learning, and they've been going on for a million years. And they've acquired their piece of the puzzle and their understanding and their wisdom. See, now this other group, like hot and cold coming together, they wanted to make love. Oh, they wanted a wedding. See, Christ wanted to have a wife. We're the bride. Christ is from another place in the universe. He's that spiritual man. He's like a god. Look what love the Father hath, that we should be called the sons of God. It's a great mystery, the Apostle Paul says. They're going to have a tree, and they're going to graft some branches into this tree. We're going to partake of the divine nature, Peter says. This was planned. It wasn't just like, we were told in the Sumerian tablets. It seems like the only reason they came here was to get some gold to fix their planet. Well, their planet was dying, yes, indeed. But they were looking for real gold. That gold is ore, and ore means light. They were looking for intelligence. They were looking for a home. They were looking for a place to move, to incarnate, to marry. They wanted to take some of their... Look at the stories. There was always the Canaanites marrying the Israelites, right? Every time we did the last series that we did was about how Canaan married into the line of Shem. How Joseph ended up marrying Asenath, Shechem's daughter, a Canaanite. Judah tried marrying Canaanites, and Esau married Canaanites, and there was always the two seeds, and they were always making a covenant. And Abraham came down into Canaan, and he met Abimelech, father of Molech, and he made an eternal Olam. That's in Hebrew, means eternal. He made a Hebrew eternal, forever, everlasting covenant with the Canaanites. And they shared that well. And he met the woman at the well who was from Samaria, from the land of Canaan. And he says, if you knew who I was, you'd ask me for water, and I'd give you eternal water. See, you're a widow, and your son's about to die. Salvation's of the Jews. We're going to transfer the line that went down through Canaan, and we're going to transfer that line over to Judah, and we're going to marry the two lines. The physical and the spiritual. The great wedding. It's going to be a beautiful wedding. This is the evolution of the soul. This is the dance that we play. The birds, they get out there and they strut and they do a dance, and they have a beautiful thing. It's called fertility. We have these celebrations. They're fertility rites. That's what Easter is. The resurrection. We got to celebrate this life. This is what it's all about. This is the great mystery. That these gods came to earth looking for a home, looking for a wife. They wanted to share their infinite knowledge with us, and they wanted to experience our knowledge because we had our own consciousness and our own beauty and design. And when those two met, it did a dance. And so, it's not true that they just came here to dig gold. And it's not true that they weren't supposed to have relations with the daughters of men. I mean, think about it. There was about 600 of these Igigi on Mars. And they didn't have no women there. And they were lonely. And they said, well, in the story, they said, well, let's go down there to Earth. There's a bunch of women. They're kind of pretty, and we're lonely. Well, now think about it. Here's these beings from Nibiru that have the technology to come from Nibiru to Earth, mine the gold, space travel, all this stuff. But they couldn't bring down 600 women for these 600 men so they could have a family and continue on. You see, they didn't do it because they didn't want to do that. What they were trying to do is find an avatar. They were trying to find, see, the man and the woman become one. And the man goes in the woman. They become one that way. They enter into a covenant. And so, the gods are the man. And this planet's the woman, Mother Earth. And they chose her. She's a beautiful woman. Mother Isis and Ninhursag. Damkina. She's a beautiful woman. We have a beautiful soul. We have something to offer this universe. And our Father in heaven loves us with all of his heart. And he set up this wedding. And he paid for the wedding. Daddy, he pays for everything. Oh, he loves his bride and he loves his son. We're his children, both sides. And he set this up. It wasn't by some accident that Canaan got in the line of Shem. It wasn't by some accident that out pops Esau and Jacob. Cain and Abel. It's not an accident. Nothing's an accident. They came here to increase the people on this earth. There were only a few 100 million people in the world until last, 100 years. I mean, you notice how quickly since Roswell or World War I and World War II, we started increasing technological advancements, and we got nuclear weapons and space travel and airplanes and cars, radios, and this little contraption we're talking on. How did we get this so quickly in just one generation? Because in this generation, the plan was set into motion. See, they came to this earth thousands of years ago, knowing that they were going to need these people, and they took the indigenous peoples and they manipulated their gene. They didn't create them. They already existed. They were standing upright, it said, walking around. But the problem is they couldn't breed with them. They couldn't mate with them. They couldn't put their genetics inside of them so they could come and incarnate and share. That's what happens when a man and woman come together. They share their genetics and they have children. And the children look like both mommy and daddy. So they had to take some of their essence and put it into the indigenous people. And this was the virgin birth. This is one of those mysteries that we've been told about, and it's just been this big fairy tale, but this is what it really means. This is what life is. And in the next video, we're going to get into a very, very interesting subject. What we're going to find out is that many of us that are on this earth are involved in this experiment. They're coming down here by the millions right now. And they're breeding us. And we've gone from a few 100 million to 7 billion. And it's going to go probably up to about 10 million people, because that's how many people there were on Nibiru. They've all got to come down here. And they've got to have bodies. Because you can't incarnate without a body. And that's your vibration. That's who you are. That's what your body is. It's an expression of who you are. See, and so what's going on in the world today is that we're more than just who we are. And some of us are a little bit more like, some of us are walking around. You might see people that are more or less hybrids. And we're going to talk about the hybrids in the upcoming in an upcoming video. And don't worry, we're going to get back to the other series. But I wanted to jump in here with this because this is very important that we get this out. Because it's like preliminary information. Then we're going to get back to this other story about the Canaanites and Melchizedek priesthood and stuff that we were talking about in the last video. We're going to finish that series. But this hybridization of the world is a very important subject, because a few years ago, if you were to talk about this and you were to say, oh, that there were people running around that were hybrids, they'd laugh you right out of town. Probably lock you up and throw away the key. But now we're finding out that it's this science fiction hologram we live in. It's true. It's real. And we're not crazy. Yeah, these weird thoughts we were having, it's true. Some of us have thought, I don't know if I belong here. I don't really know what's going on. The story we've been told down there at the local church is not really making sense. It's not adding up. And you were right. So we're going to have to put all these things that we've been learning together. See, we're not done yet. You thought, last time we did some of this exploring and this getting some of this information out there, and you thought, well, maybe he's done, with this crazy information, And then now we find out that there's a little bit more information. We're going to find out there's a little bit more. And there's quite a bit more information that we just didn't know. And when we get all this information, we're going to start putting it together. So that's why we're going to do this video at this juncture, because we need to get some of this information in there so we can make a better conclusion, so we can understand why we're here. Because it's never been told to human beings up until now as to why we're here, who we are. Never been told. This is a revelation that we're having right now, right here on YouTube. It has to do with the United States, the Constitution of the United States. It has to do with Christopher Columbus, the colonization of Christ, or the anointed beings that are mingling with the earth creatures. We've got the Nibirian creatures and the earth creatures, and they meet. And we're going to have a great wedding. And we're going to share like a beautiful love story. We're going to share our experiences with each other, and we're going to make beautiful, sacred love. It's going to be a beautiful thing. So anyway, this is David Vos. I'm going to go ahead and go. I hope you guys have a really great day. I'll see you again tomorrow.